I didn't even make it through the front gate before I sensed something was off. My 6-year-old daughter Zoe usually bursts toward me with wide eyes and that unstoppable grin. Today, she slipped out of the farmhouse like a shadow, clutching her little bare buttons as if it was the only thing keeping her safe. "Hey, Pumpkin." I crouched down on the gravel path. She stepped into my arms, but her hug felt stiff. Her small body trembled against my chest. I asked if she'd had fun with Grandma. Zoe just stared at the peeling paint on the porch posts. I buckled her into her car seat and flicked on the ignition. She didn't answer me until we were pulling onto the country road, the fields like dark waves under the morning sky. Then she leaned forward and whispered so soft I almost missed it, Mom. "Grandma told me not to tell, but there was a girl in the basement." My heart stopped. A girl in the basement. I turned in my seat. "What girl, sweetie?" My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Zoe's big brown eyes filled with fear. "She wore pajamas. She's crying. Grandma said she's not real, but she looked real mommy." I swallowed hard, forced my voice steady. "Okay, thank you for telling me." Before doubt or disbelief could creep in, I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. "Cincinnati EMS, what's your emergency?" the dispatcher asked. "This is Brooke Miller. I'm in Ross County near Athens, Ohio. My daughter says her grandmother locked a girl in the basement. Please send help right away." I stayed on the line answering questions, my address, Zoe's age, Grandma Margaret's farmhouse. All the while, my mind raced back through every awkward visit I'd ever made here. The way Grandma's smile never quite reached her eyes. The strange hush that fell over the place at night. The moments I'd brushed off as quirks too polite to probe. I'm 31. I work nights as a pediatric nurse at Mercy Hospital. Zoe and I lost her dad to a boating accident 4 years ago. Zoe was only 2. Since then, it's been just us. We share scrambled eggs at dawn, bedtime stories by flashlight, and pretend we're adventurers discovering hidden treasure in the backyard. But nothing in my life has prepared me to pick up my daughter from her grandmother's house and learn that a real child, someone in danger, might be trapped just below our feet. I pressed my forehead to the headrest, closed my eyes, and whispered, "Please be okay." Sirens in the distance answered me. I hadn't realized how loudly my heart was pounding until the first patrol car flashed into view. I stepped out of the patrol car, the chill air wrapping around me like a warning. The farmhouse stood silent under a gray sky, its red door chipped and faded as if it had absorbed too many secrets. Behind me, Deputy Carter's boots crunched against the gravel. Inside, another deputy was forcing the basement door open, the heavy oak groaning on its hinges. My heart hammered in my ears, each beat a drum of resolve. I had gone from shaken mother to determined protector in the span of an hour. The old oak tree in the front yard, its gnarled branches reaching toward the sky, seemed to bow as we passed. It reminded me of my own grief, bent but unbroken. I stepped past Carter, my bare arms stiff in the cold, and followed the beam of his flashlight down the creaking porch. My mind raced over every detail I'd let slide in the past. The strange hush of this place, Grandma Margaret's stiff comments, the way she always seemed to watch me instead of welcoming me. The basement door cracked open with a forceful push, revealing a set of concrete steps leading into darkness. The beam lit a scattering of old tools, yellowed newspapers, a single dusty teddy bear watching over the gloom. Buttons. Zoe's bear had almost matched the one sitting there like a twin separated by fate. I swallowed and took a careful step down. Beneath my feet, the air grew colder, thicker. Carter muttered something I couldn't hear as he slipped on a discarded rag and nearly fell. My breath caught. Every instinct told me that walking down that stairwell was taking a risk, but each heartbeat thrummed with the promise that I had to do this. My head buzzed with questions. How long had this girl been here? Why would... And then I heard a soft sob from below, a sound so tiny it could almost have been carried away by the draft. My fingers curled into a fist, buttons in hand, as I peered into darkness. I waited for Carter to advance, but something held me back, an urgent, silent command from inside that said I needed to go alone. The sob came again, closer. I took another step, and that's when I realized the real truth of the house wasn't just hidden behind a locked door, it was woven into its every floorboard, waiting for someone to unearth it. I paused on the landing, every nerve alive. My head throbbed with memories of nights spent replaying Zoe's first laugh, her tiny hand gripping mine as we walked past fireworks, her trusting smile dissolving my fear. Now I felt something like fire in my chest, a fierce warmth that chased away the dread. The two deputies were still arguing about procedure behind me, but I edged forward, letting their voices blur. The beam of light trembled as I advanced, casting jagged shadows that danced against the concrete walls. A single light bulb hung overhead, its bare filament flickering as if the room itself was a breathless witness. My reflection glimmered in a crooked mirror propped against a crate, weary, determined, a mother ready to wage war for innocence. I saw in that mirror all the nights I'd lain awake after Ethan's funeral, wondering if I could ever be whole again. I'd thought grief had broken me, but now I sensed an inner strength, unspoken and vital, rising to meet this moment. The walls around me were marked with scratches, tiny tally marks like the girl had counted the days herself. Beyond them lay the room, its doorway sealed by a rusted chain. The deputies were fumbling with the lock while I knelt and traced the marks. 34 scratches. That meant she'd been here for more than a month. My stomach lurched. Logic twisted inside me. Margaret couldn't have been unaware. She had to know what those marks meant. I pressed my palm against the cold chain, my breath forming little clouds. The symbols scratched into the wood above the door looked like a child's attempt at drawing birds' witness wings. Maybe she dreamed of escape. I pulled buttons from my coat pocket and placed it against the door as though offering the girl a friend outside her cage. A sudden noise steel on metal made me jump. The deputies unlocked the chain and the door swung inward on squealing hinges. A rush of stale air spilled into the hallway, carrying the faint scent of cinnamon and tears. I stared at the empty floor, the single mattress pushed aside, then a soft shuffle drew my gaze to the corner. A girl's silhouette hunched beneath an old quilt, eyes fixed on the door. She looked up, and in her stare I saw sorrow and hope tangled like the roots of that oak tree outside. My chest tightened. I raised my arms and whispered, "I'm here." But her lips didn't move, and all I could hear was the echo of the chain hitting the floor, proof that some promises come unbound with a single act of faith. Time stretched thin as I crouched beside her. Her eyes, wide and raw, shone like wet stones. She was smaller than I expected for a child of 8 or 9, her limbs thin as willow branches, her clothes stained and threadbare. I brushed a lock of damp hair like autumn leaves tangled in twigs from her forehead. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and I felt a fury ignite. How had someone let this happen? How had I, her own blood, let her believe she wasn't real? Deputy Carter cleared his throat behind me. He offered a hand up, but I shook my head, clutching her hand instead. "You're safe now," I murmured, my voice fierce with promise. The girl's grip tightened. I swallowed and looked to Carter. "My daughter saw you," I said quietly. "I want her with me, now." He nodded, drawing his gun belt into a sharper silhouette. "We'll get her upstairs." He paused, glancing at the broken lamp that cast half the room into twilight. I recognized the lamp. It was a candelabra from the dining hall, repurposed, the 3 arms bent like a wounded bird's wing. It struck me as a symbol. Despite the darkness, someone had tried to bring light here. I lifted the quilt, revealing the child's arms, thin, bruised one in a splint. She flinched at the touch, but didn't pull away. Carter called for the paramedics once more, and I scooped the girl into my arms like I would scoop Zoe on a bad dream night. Skin against skin, our warmth mingled, a silent promise that this time, someone would fight to keep her. I glanced at Carter, who nodded toward the stairs. My mind spun, what would Margaret say? What excuse could she spin now? Yet I felt no room for her, no space for excuses. I took a step, and with each shift of weight, the old floor groaned. I imagined it as the farmhouse itself, protesting the truth finally surfacing. We climbed the deputies flanking us, each step a beat in a rhythm I'd longed to hear rescue. As I emerged into the pale morning light, the girl's head lolled against my shoulder. I saw Zoe waiting by the patrol car, buttons clutched tight to her chest. Her face was an open question. I steadied the child and called to Zoe, "Come here, sweet girl." Zoe advanced, then froze at sight of the stranger in my arms. Her small face scrunched as she took in the bruise on the girl's arm. I squared my shoulders, looked at both of them, and realized that the hardest part wasn't finding her. It was what came next, and I didn't know if I was ready. The paramedics whisked the girl, her name tag read Anna Marie Torres, to the ambulance parked under the bending oak. A thin, yellow police tape fluttered like a wounded bird's wing around the porch. I stood by the car with Zoe watching from the back seat. Anna Marie's pale hand drifted from mine as paramedics strapped her to a gurney. She glanced at me, once her gaze like a bookmark holding the moment in place. I felt a weight in my chest and leaned against the hood buttons in Zoe's lap, mirroring the one tucked under Anna's arm. Officer Ruiz approached with a folder stamped "Evidence dust motes dancing in the morning sun like tiny sparks of truth." He told me Grandma Margaret had been taken to the county jail. She declined to speak. In his calm, methodical voice, he described her involvement in online forums that whispered fear of strangers, focus on hidden dangers, the same conspiracies that had wormed into her mind and turned a harmless girl into prey. I looked down at Zoe. Her small brow furrowed. "She's okay, honey," I said, but I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Social media was aflutter already, neighbors texting about ritual rooms, secret cults talk of Margaret having kidnapped more than one child. I thought of the lines of neighbors who'd knocked on our door offering casseroles, but none had thought to call the cops when I dropped Zoe off. The farmhouse sat quiet behind us, its windows blank as eyes that had seen too much. I thought about my mother, how she taught me to trust my instincts, to never ignore a chill in my spine. I thought about the weekend Bible study gatherings that used to spill into that porch long before Margaret retreated behind locked doors and tally marks. Now the church was silent, the pews empty, as if faith itself had fled under the weight of betrayal. I took a breath, tuning out the murmurs of bystanders, capturing every detail on their phones. Motherhood had taught me many things, but the hardest lesson was that evil sometimes wears a familiar face. And if I didn't act quickly, it could slip into Zoe's world again before she knew what was happening. My phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. "Stay strong. I'm here." I typed back, "On my way. Meet us at the ER." I slipped behind the wheel, Zoe climbing in beside me. I glanced at her face in the rearview mirror. Her eyes shone with something I'd never seen before. Pride, fear, hope. I whispered, "We're going to keep her safe. Together." Then I hit the gas and the tires chewed up gravel, carrying us away from a house of lies and toward a new kind of battle. At Mercy Hospital, the ER was a frantic ballet of urgency and compassion. I signed forms with trembling hands as doctors swarmed Anna Marie, checking vitals, examining the splint, scanning her bruises. Zoe sat beside me on a stiff plastic chair, buttons caught in her lap, her small hand reaching out to rest on Anna's blanket. The child's eyes fluttered open in the sterile glow, and she gave me a half smile. In that moment, I felt something inside me shift, a potent mix of relief and rage, and a protective fierceness I didn't know I possessed until now. I realized that motherhood isn't just warmth and lullabies, it's the willingness to face darkness, even when it threatens to swallow you whole. Outside the exam room, Officer Ruiz had questions. Did I want to press charges? Would I testify? Could I describe what I'd seen? I nodded each answer, forging a new piece of armor around my heart. As I spoke, I imagined Grandma Margaret cell-cold, lonely, stripped of her twisted certainty. I felt a momentary twinge of pity, then let it go. There was no room for empathy for someone who had stolen childhood. Zoe's small voice broke through my thoughts. "Mommy, can Anna stay with us?" She spoke with the innocence of someone who believed kindness could rebuild worlds. I looked down at her and saw in her eyes the truth. I'd been seeking children know what adults often forget, that compassion and courage are two sides of the same coin. I turned back to the doctors. "Can she?" The pediatric nurse smiled and said, "With proper care and foster services, she needs a safe place to go tonight." My mind raced. I'd promised Zoe we'd keep her friend safe. I'd vowed to protect these small lives with everything I had. I thought of our little home, the pink walls of Zoe's room, the shelf of books they could share. I imagined Anna dragging buttons through the door, Evelyn's cross-stitch of sunflowers hanging on the wall like a beacon. And then the weight of risk settled on me, taking in a traumatized child facing social services, juggling night shifts, opening my heart to more loss. A twist of logic, this felt more right than anything I'd done since Ethan's accident. When I finally looked at Zoe, her hopeful face nudged me. I squeezed her hand and nodded. "Yes," I said, "she can stay." As I signed the temporary custody papers, I thought of the oak tree's bowed branches and realized we all bend under sorrow, but we don't have to break. I lifted Zoe onto my hip and held Anna's small hand, feeling their combined weight like a promise. We were three imperfect souls bound by hope. Outside, the Ohio sky had turned from gray to gold, and I knew this was only the beginning of our new story. I woke before dawn the next morning, the air in our small house heavy with unspoken questions. The soft groan of the old springs in Zoe's bed reminded me of the farmhouse stairs, each protest a memory of the past week's chaos. I tiptoed into the kitchen, the floorboards whispering under my weight, and flicked on the kettle. Steam curled like a silent prayer, and I stared at Buttons sitting on the counter, its one glass eye glinting in the pale light. Anna was asleep in the guest room down the hall, her ragged breathing a fragile rhythm that both comforted and worried me. Outside, the sun struggled through gray clouds, painting the oak tree beyond our window in muted gold. It felt symbolic, a battered trunk still upright after every storm. I wrapped my hands around a mug and thought of how life tests us in tiny increments, a child's whispered cry, a locked door, a conspiracy that poisoned a grandmother's mind. The world beyond our windows was stirring, cars on the street, neighbors heading to church, a local coffee shop's neon sign flickering on. But I felt suspended, stuck between gratitude for our safety and dread of what might come next. My phone buzzed with a headline, "Local Teacher Heroin Harbors Missing Girl." The words bold and accusatory. The article quoted an anonymous neighbor who called me reckless for taking Anna in without proper clearance. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. Courage didn't mean ignoring risk. It meant embracing it. And right now, I needed to decide if I could stand firm when everyone else told me to back down. A gentle knock at the door startled me. It was Olivia, dark circles under her eyes, but a steady smile on her lips. She carried 2 steaming lattes and a pad full of scribbled notes, court dates, social services, contacts, even a list of churches willing to sponsor foster care. "You look like hell," she said, passing me a cup. I shrugged, grateful for the caffeine. "I've never felt more alive," I confessed, pressing the warmth of the mug into my palms. We sat at the tiny kitchen table, the radio murmuring news of the day. Hunt continues for missing children in Appalachian region. I shivered, remembering the scratch marks on that basement door, each one a plea for freedom. Olivia flipped through her notes. "They're calling for a full investigation into your home. CPS wants to interview you, even inspect your bedroom." "My bedroom," I echoed, heart sinking. Social services believed that taking in a traumatized child could be dangerous, but they hadn't seen the terror in Anna's eyes. They hadn't heard Zoe's trembling voice begging for justice. I stood and paced the floor slick with morning sun and realized there was no neutral ground I could fight for these girls or let bureaucracy win. I looked at Olivia, her hair tied back like a warrior's braid, and felt a surge of determination we would navigate this storm together. But when I opened my front door to call the caseworker back, a plain white envelope lay on the welcome mat. No return address. My name scrawled in red ink. Inside was a single sentence: "Leave the girl or you'll regret it." That threat rattled me more than anything so far. I pressed my back against the door and closed my eyes. The oak tree outside swayed in a breeze that felt too deliberate, like a warning finger. I was torn between protecting Anna and shielding Zoe from greater danger. What kind of enemy writes in red ink someone consumed by rage or fear? My phone rang. It was Officer Ruiz. "Ma'am, Mrs. Thompson wants to talk to you," he said quietly. "She's the mother of the little girl who disappeared 3 years ago, you remember?" My fingers tightened around the handset. I did remember a sobbing widow at the fundraising pancake breakfast, her eyes searching for answers no one could give. She says she might have seen Margaret at the county fair last weekend. "Margaret," I whispered, breath catching. "She was supposed to be in jail." Ruiz hesitated. "Her bail hearing got postponed. She's been released on her own recognizance." The world tilted. Margaret, the conspiracist who'd convinced herself Anna was in danger, was free, and maybe she was coming for us. I sank onto the edge of the couch, the upholstery cracking beneath me. I thought of the tally marks carved into that basement wall: 34 days of captivity. 34 chances for someone to intervene before Zoe's whisper saved a life. And I realized that rescue was only the beginning. A darker game was just unfolding. I spent the day juggling paperwork with hospital visits, but every conversation felt like a battlefield. Social workers eyed me warily, asking if I understood the serious responsibilities of foster care. A lawyer from the district attorney's office warned me about potential custody disputes, hinting that Margaret's son, my late husband's brother, might contest my guardianship of the girls. Neighbors peeked through curtains as I passed by with Anna in tow, her small hand gripping mine like a lifeline. I could almost hear their whispers. What if she snaps? No background check. This is small-town Ohio, not a soap opera. Their judgments pressed down on me, but each time I looked at Anna's hollow cheeks or at Zoe's unwavering faith when she handed Anna a snack, I saw the stakes. Sometimes justice hides in plain sight. You just need the courage to hold up a mirror. By sunset, I found myself in our driveway, leaning against the hood keys dangling in my hand. The oak tree's silhouette stretched across the pavement like a guardian's arm. I clutched buttons and felt the familiar knot of fear and resolve tighten in my chest. I was ready to go back to the farmhouse, reopen every locked door, and expose every secret Margaret had buried. But I knew that moving against her again meant inviting confrontation, maybe violence. My mind spun with questions. Did I really have the right? Or was I trespassing on dangerous ground? I inhaled the cool air, letting doubt and determination wrestle within me. And in that heated pause, I knew the next move would shape all our lives. That night, after Zoe fell asleep clutching her pillow, I set up my laptop at the kitchen island. I felt like a spy. Headlamp on. I plugged in Margaret's old laptop, the one I'd found hidden behind her dresser when deputies searched the farmhouse. It still smelled of mothballs and regret. A password prompt glared at me, daring me to proceed. My fingers hovered over the keys as I recalled the symbols scratched above the basement door. I typed Oak 34. Wings on a wild hunch. The screen blinked, hesitated, then unlocked. I saw folders with names like Child Watch Safe Zone Rescue Ops Code for the twisted mission Margaret had cooked up. My stomach churned. Each file held reports on missing children, maps of rural parks, and message logs from an online forum called Truth Keepers, where paranoid theories flowered like weeds. It was a shrine to fear, a place where Margaret had recruited sympathizers to justify her crimes. My eyes stung as I clicked on one file, a scanned letter from someone calling themselves Sentinel, thanking Margaret for protecting the endangered youth from their own families. The writer used words like perverse neglect and systemic betrayal. Margaret's handwriting looped across the page like barbed wire. I felt bile rise to my throat. Zoe's trust had saved one life. My choice to dig deeper now risked losing everything. I quickly downloaded the folder to a flash drive and deleted the originals. Then I sat back and realized that knowing the truth meant becoming a target. The laptop's cooling fan whirred a lone heartbeat in the silent room, and I understood that knowledge was both weapon and burden. By morning, I had a plan. I called Officer Ruiz and arranged a meeting at the farmhouse, promising him the flash drive with the evidence. I told Zoe she'd spend the day at Olivia's, where cookies and board games awaited. As I drove down the winding road toward Margaret's place, my heart pounded a solemn rhythm. Each mile felt like a confrontation with my worst fear. I passed the county line sign and spotted the farmhouse beyond the trees, its red door still chipped, the curtains drawn. For a moment, I hesitated, one foot on the gravel, thinking maybe I was making a mistake. Maybe there was a safer way. But then I looked at the flash drive clenched in my fist and heard Zoe's voice. "Mommy, you saved her." My chest tightened, and I stepped forward. The deputy cruiser waited at the end of the drive, lights off, engine idling like a coiled spring. Ruiz greeted me with a nod and a grim smile. "Glad you came prepared," he said, taking the drive. I watched him slide it into his pocket. It felt like handing off a detonator. Together, we approached the front porch. My breath caught as the old oak tree's branches scratched against the siding, an omen or an applause I couldn't tell. I raised my hand to knock, then let it fall to my side. The moment stretched. Then the door swung open and Margaret stood there, her eyes cold as river stones. She didn't speak. She simply tilted her head as if studying a jigsaw piece that didn't belong. I met her gaze, feeling my own resolve blaze. But in that instant, I realized this confrontation wasn't just about Anna or Zoe. It was a reckoning with every lie Margaret believed in, and every truth I was willing to fight for. And as her lips curled into the faintest of smiles, I knew the real battle was about to begin. Detective Ruiz stepped forward. "Margaret Collins," he said, voice steady. "We have evidence you conspired to kidnap and imprison multiple children." Margaret's gaze flicked to Ruiz, then back to me, as though weighing her options. I felt a mix of triumph and dread. Did I want her locked away again? Or did I want to understand how a caring grandmother could become so unhinged? Justice demanded answers, but so did compassion, and they felt at odds. She folded her arms, her posture rigid like a soldier's at parade rest. "You have no proof," she hissed, her voice thin but sharp. Ruiz held up the flash drive. "Digital Records Forum logs your own handwriting." Margaret smiled, then a slow, strange arc that didn't reach her eyes. "You think this proves I'm a monster? I'm the only one who saw the truth. I saved them from a world that neglected them." My heart lurched. In her mind, she was a savior. The oak tree's shadow fell across her as if the past itself was swallowing her whole. I took a step closer. No one needs saving like that. Children deserve trust, not cages. She tilted her head and narrowed her eyes. "What do you know of trust?" "Brooke Miller, you abandoned your husband's memory the moment he died." My breath caught. The undercurrent of blame, why did it sting so sharply? I realized she'd been watching me all along, sizing me up, weaponizing my grief. Rage surged through me. I gripped the lapel of my jacket. "I'm here because I believe in second chances, but not for people who hide behind them." The wind gusted, rattling the door. Margaret's face hardened. "We'll see what the court decides." She slammed the door. The echo lingered, a drumbeat of conflict and unanswered questions. Ruiz sighed and turned to me. "You okay?" I nodded, though my voice felt distant. "We keep pushing. We get every charge we can." He offered his arm, and I accepted it, stepping away from that door as the oak tree's branches sighed behind us. And in that moment, I realized that saving one child had changed everything. But the battle for truth, for trust, was only growing darker. As we drove away, sunlight fractured through the canopy overhead, scattering light across the dash. I glanced in the rearview mirror at the farmhouse receding into distance and felt a quiet determination bloom in my chest. Zoe was waiting for me at Olivia's, and Anna needed me at the hospital. Beyond that, there were more children out there hidden by fear or neglect. The world wasn't kind to small voices whispering in the dark. But I had learned that danger can be met with an open heart. I thought of that oak tree again, how it weathers every season, its roots deep in the earth. I wanted to be that kind of strength for my daughters, for Anna, for anyone who needed a champion. Tomorrow, I would head to court to testify, to show them that a single voice can unravel a lie. Tonight, I would hold Zoe close and let her know that heroes aren't born in safety, they're forged in every choice to stand up when the world tells you to step back. And as the cruiser carried me toward the next fight, I felt the first stirring of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild not only a safe space for two frightened girls, but a kinder world where no child's cry goes unheard. I woke before the sun, the soft, gold light seeping through our bedroom curtains like a promise unfulfilled. Zoe still slept curled against her pillow, and I lingered in the doorway, my heart a knot of anticipation and dread. Today was the hearing, the moment when a judge would decide whether my desperate gamble to protect two frightened girls would stand or unravel under legal scrutiny. I slid into the kitchen and brewed coffee, the bitter aroma filling the air like armor. On the counter lay Anna's toy stethoscope, a symbol of her dreams before Margaret's lies stole her childhood. I touched it gently as if the plastic tubes could transmit courage. My laptop was open to the evidence folder, chained whispers and tally marks, forum logs, and the faded photo of Anna smiling at a county fair. The oak tree outside my window stretched its branches toward the sky, an unspoken witness to every secret this town squelched beneath polite facades. I sorted my notes in neat piles, the 911 transcript, Olivia's professional assessment, the sheriff's report. Each page carried the weight of a fragile life. A single envelope rested beside them, sealed with Margaret's distinctive red ink. "You'll regret this." My pulse throbbed. I could feel the town's eyes on me, already waiting to see if a single mother with a broken heart could become the heroine they'd vilified. I poured coffee into a mug that bore the words, "Fearless, a gift from Ethan's best friend," and took a long sip. My reflection shimmered in the window, a solitary figure poised at the edge of a precipice. Outside, the morning breeze rattled the oak's lowest branch as though applauding my resolve. Today, I would step into a courtroom and demand justice. And in that moment of quiet before the storm, I felt the first tremor of courage rise in my bones, whispering that I could survive whatever came next. The caseworker arrived mid-morning, clipboard in hand, and an expression that balanced sympathy with suspicion. She was younger than me, her corporate blue suit almost too crisp for the small town where everyone knew your nanny by name. Behind her, a uniformed deputy rolled up the driveway. They exchanged polite nods before she cleared her throat and said, "Ms. Miller, I need to review your home environment again. Child safety protocols and all." My palms itched to push the paperwork aside and show her the scars on Anna's arm instead, but I nodded and led them inside. The deputy stood guard by the doorway while the caseworker clicked a pen and studied the living room, the mismatched throw pillows, the shelf of storybooks, the framed photo of Ethan chasing Zoe through a cornfield. She asked if children could reach the kitchen stove, if there were locks on the bathroom cabinets, if I kept emergency numbers up to date. Each question felt like a test. Was I a vigilant mother or a reckless vigilante? I answered with calm authority, pointing out the safety gates, the smoke detectors, the emergency bag by the front door. Yet her eyes lingered on the door to Anna's former bedroom, now repurposed as a playroom, as if she suspected I'd hide something behind its pastel paint. When she finally finished, she tapped her pen and said, "We'll compile this report for the judge. Expect calls from our office." As she left, I exhaled and realized that every act of protection carries a price. On the porch, I spotted a black sedan idling at the end of the drive, no state plates tinted windows. My breath caught. Was it Margaret's new ally or a local reporter seeking scandal? Before I could react, the sedan peeled away into the hollow of the trees, leaving me with the echo of its engine, and the certainty that keeping Anna and Zoe safe would demand more than legal papers. It would demand vigilance against unseen threats. On the highway to the courthouse, I guided my old SUV through the rolling hills. Zoe's small hand in mine, Anna nestled against her car seat. I kept the radio low, classical music mingling with the morning sun on the windshield. But my mind buzzed like the engine's hum. I thought of the social clash unfolding, neighbors who whispered that I was meddling where I didn't belong. Others who dropped casseroles at my door, silent thanks for exposing the rot beneath their safe neighborhoods. How quickly people choose their truths. Some accepting the digital proof I handed them, others clinging to conspiracy threads. Margaret spun online. Zoe pressed her head against my arm. "Mommy, I'm proud of you." Her words were simple, but they struck deeper than any speech I could give in court. I glanced at Anna, her wide eyes watching the oak-lined roads pass by like silent sentinels. A flicker of doubt tried to creep in. Was I doing the right thing, forcing 2 children through this ordeal? Then I caught the reflection of the oak tree in the rearview mirror, its roots unseen but holding it steady against the wind. If that tree could stand through storms and scorch, so could I. I slid my hand to the center console, brushing the dashboard where I'd taped Anna's artwork crayon birds with wings spread wide. "We'll be your wings today," I whispered, and the girls smiled back. The courthouse loomed ahead, its limestone facade as cold and imposing as a judge's gavel. My chest tightened. We sat there for a moment, engines off, and I realized that stepping out would require every ounce of the inner steel forged in the darkest nights I'd ever known. I opened the door and the gravel crunched beneath my shoes, each step a silent vow to protect. Inside the courthouse, the roar of fluorescent lights and hushed murmurs greeted me. The high ceilings swallowed every sound, making footsteps echo like distant thunder. Zoe clutched my hand from the moment we crossed the lobby. Anna's fingers twined with hers, a small act of solidarity that filled me with fierce pride. We passed rows of glass display cases holding plaques of judges, long retired symbols of a system built to protect the powerless, but sometimes failing them. The bailiff directed us to courtroom 2B, where the defense table lay opposite the prosecution's neatly arranged stack of files. The gallery was half full, a scattering of neighbors, a handful of reporters leaning on smartphones, and the Thompson family. Anna's neighbors sitting together, faces drawn with lingering grief and new hope. As the bailiff called the court to order, I felt my pulse thrum against my ribs, my palm against the polished wood rail warmed by countless hands over the years. Judge Hernandez entered his black robe, a mantle of authority, and the hearing began with procedural formalities. The defense attorney rose first, a lean man with a hawkish nose, his suit too sharp for empathetic eyes. He spoke in low tones, questioning jurisdiction, hinting that I had no right to harbor a minor without full background checks. My stomach twisted. I'd already faced a barrage of such insinuations. When they called me to the stand, I swallowed past the lump in my throat and realized that this system I'd trusted to mete out fairness could also twist it into a weapon against those who dared to defy convention. My heart raced, but my voice came clear. I did this for one reason: to believe 2 children's truth and fight for their safety. The judge nodded solemnly, and I returned to my seat, a tremor of vulnerability and unbreakable resolve echoing in my chest. The prosecution presented the evidence: next surveillance videos of Margaret pacing the county fairgrounds, her eyes scanning crowds as if hunting prey. Digital logs, time-stamped deep into the night, her fingers typing warnings of family neglect and children in peril. Each clip, each message struck like a blow to the courtroom's polite veneer. The defense attorney argued it was digital hearsay that a grandmother's love could be misinterpreted. But then Olivia took the stand, her calm demeanor and professional credentials as a child psychologist carrying weight. She testified that children rarely invent trauma in such vivid detail, that Zoe's account was not fantasy, but an urgent plea. When Olivia mentioned the tally marks and the symbols bird wings etched on the basement walls, the gallery gasped. I watched Margaret's face pale, her composure cracking for the first time. In that moment, I recognized a broader conflict: society's blind deference to pedigree and appearance versus the raw, sometimes messy truth that emerges from the margins. When Olivia finished, the air in the courtroom felt charged, like static before a storm. As the judge announced a brief recess, I felt a shudder pass through me, part fear, part triumph, knowing that the battle for justice wasn't just legal. It was a reckoning with every bias we held. During recess, I stepped into the hallway, my chest tight as I leaned against the cool marble wall. Reporters hovered, but I refused to speak to them. This wasn't a spectacle. A woman approached, her eyes red-rimmed Anna's mother, Claire Thompson. She slipped an arm around my waist and whispered, "Thank you for listening. I thought I'd never see her again." Her voice cracked. I felt tears sting my own eyes. "We're going to make sure no one ever locks her away again," I murmured. She nodded, her grip fierce. In that touch, I felt the weight of community and the power of shared grief turning into collective strength. Yet as I watched her walk away, I noticed a man in the corner, arms crossed, frowning, one of the neighbors who'd criticized me online. His scowl reminded me that even in grief, people find fault. I folded my arms around myself, aware that public opinion could swing like a blade and that tomorrow's headlines might vilify me again. Still, Claire's gratitude settled over me like a benediction. My gaze flicked to the oak wood door leading back into the courtroom. Beyond it lay more challenges, cross-examination, final arguments, a judge's decision that would ripple through all our lives. I wiped my palms and squared my shoulders, feeling the old fear replaced by a fierce conviction this was not just my fight, but ours. Then I stepped back inside, ready for the next act. The afternoon session resumed with the defense calling its final witness, Margaret herself. She took the stand with a hollow defiance, her eyes drifting past me as though I were a ghost. The attorney prodded her gently at first. "You believed you were rescuing Anna," and her voice was low and steady as she insisted I acted on faith. "I saved a child from neglect." Faith. The word echoed in my mind, a spark lighting the tinder of my own beliefs. I rose to cross-examine, palms braced on the rail. I asked about the tally marks, the lock on the basement door, the chain's rusted links that had cut into the girl's skin. Each question was a blade, and Margaret's answers grew shorter, more brittle, until she finally broke. She needed protection. The world is corrupt. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I held her gaze firmly and said, "Protection doesn't imprison, it empowers. Children need safety and freedom, not fear." The gallery shifted as though uncomfortable truths were knocking at their doors. The judge's gavel came down, signaling the defense's surrender of the floor. I felt a mix of triumph and exhaustion, like a marathon runner crossing an unseen finish line. But as the courtroom emptied, a chilling draft brushed my neck. In the hush, I realized that Margaret's warped faith had nearly ensnared 2 young lives. My own faith in truth, in justice, in listening to small voices had guided me here. Yet the shadows lingered, reminding me that conviction can both save and destroy. I gathered my notes and climbed down from the stand, every step echoing through me, like the promise that some battles redefine who we are. Closing arguments began with the prosecution summarizing the case. A grandmother's conspiracy turned child's nightmare into reality, undone by a mother's courage and 2 children's honesty. The defense pleaded for leniency, citing mental health struggles and a belief in unseen threats. I watched the judge's face unreadable beneath furrowed brows. When he finally spoke, his voice was solemn. This court finds Margaret Collins guilty on all counts of unlawful imprisonment and child endangerment. A hush fell, then relieved sighs and the soft click of pens. I felt my knees weaken and sank into the seat, tears escaping unbidden. Chairs scraped and Ottawa-like whispers filled the room as Margaret was led away, her eyes fixed dead ahead. I closed them and let the tension drain from my shoulders. Outside, the sun had begun to set, casting the courthouse in a warm glow light reclaiming darkness. Zoe raced into my arms, Anna close behind with Claire's steady presence. We stood together on the steps, the courthouse's weight behind us, but our small cluster felt like a fortress. I looked up at the sky where a lone hawk circled above its wings, broad and unhurried. In that moment, I understood that true justice is not a final decree, but an ongoing promise to guard what's vulnerable. My heart swelled with both relief and resolve. The fight might be over here, but life's storms never cease. And as the hawk wheeled overhead, a silent oath formed within me to listen, to believe, and to protect again and again until every child's voice earns its wings. The drive home was quiet, punctuated only by the hum of tires on asphalt and occasional sighs of relief. We passed the oak trees lining the road, their branches no longer ominous but noble sentinels standing guard over dark secrets now laid bare. I glanced at Zoe and Anna in the back seat, one clutching buttons, the other echoing each breath, and felt a fierce love so vast it threatened to overwhelm me. In the rearview mirror, I saw the courthouse disappear into the horizon, replaced by rolling fields that shimmered like hope reborn. But I also saw the shadows stretching behind our taillights, reminders that vigilance never sleeps. I reached for the radio and tuned into a local station where a familiar voice recounted the verdict and praised community action. I turned it off, preferring silence, for in the quiet I could hear the steady rhythm of my heart and know that the day's victory was more than legal. It was personal redemption. When we pulled into our driveway, the porch light flickered on, as if welcoming us home. I opened the door and ushered the girls inside. The house felt different now, walls that once echoed fear, now hummed with new purpose. I tucked Anna into a fluffy couch pillow in the living room, gave Zoe a hug that squeezed the last of any lingering doubt from my chest, and turned to the front window. The oak tree stood tall, its leaves whispering in the evening breeze. Tonight, it was a beacon, not a warning. And as I blew out the hallway light and closed the door on a day that tested every fiber of my being, I knew our story was far from over, but we had survived stronger and more united than before. But as I climbed the stairs to tuck Zoe into bed, a flicker in the hallway caught my eye. A scrap of paper slipped beneath the guest room door. Kneeling, I picked it up. In the familiar red ink, Margaret's handwriting read, "You may have won today, but the truth lives in shadows." My breath caught. The oak tree's branches scratched against the window pane like a warning. I straightened, heart pounding with a mix of triumph and foreboding. I could taste the sweetness of justice achieved, yet the threat lingered a silent pulse in our home. I slid the door open, the dim light revealing a corridor of memories, Anna's drawings taped to the wall, Zoe's school awards shining under the glow. I pressed the note against my chest and felt a spark of something unnameable, the recognition that every victory births new challenges. And as footsteps echoed behind me, soft, cautious, unwavering, I realized that protection is not a one-time act, but a lifelong vow. The final door stood before me, closed yet fragile. I slipped the paper into my pocket, squared my shoulders, and took the first step toward whatever came next. I woke before dawn again, the pale light of early morning slipping through the curtains like a promise half kept. My heart hammered as I replayed the note in my mind. You may have won today, but the truth lives in shadows. I clutched it in my palm, the crimson ink still staining my fingertips, and felt the surge of adrenaline that followed every threat. Anger, fear, and a fierce determination mingled into a single roaring spark. Brewing coffee as the kettle hissed, I gazed at Buttons perched on the counter, its glass eye reflecting my own steely resolve. Outside the oak tree we'd come to treat as a silent sentinel stood gnarled and grand, its branches already stirring in the breeze, a reminder that some roots run deeper than fear. I stared at its silhouette, imagining how its limbs would arch protectively over my daughters and Anna, a living symbol of everything I was fighting to preserve. Last night's shadows had pressed against our home's walls, but today I would press back, unearthing every secret Margaret had tried to bury. The steam from my mug curled upward like a question. How far will you go? And I knew I had to answer it for myself and for the children, depending on me. Then, with a single breath, I folded the note and tucked it into my pocket, feeling the weight of every choice I'd made and every risk still ahead. By mid-morning, I found myself in the social services office again, those sterile walls echoing with hushed conversations about case reassessments and foster care regulations. The caseworker I'd met days ago gave me a sympathetic smile behind her desk, but sympathy alone wouldn't protect these girls. She tapped a pen in a leather-bound notebook, eyes darting to the clock, as if timing how long I'd let hope slip away. We understand your dedication, Ms. Miller, she said, voice smooth like varnished wood, but we have protocol to follow. My stomach clenched. Protocol felt like a slow-moving tide that could pull Anna back under the waters Margaret had dredged. I reminded myself that laws are built to protect, but also to confine. Sometimes it takes someone willing to bend their edges to catch a drowning soul. While the caseworker recited regulations, I noticed a file labeled Cold Cases Unresolved Missing Children stacked high on a shelf. My pulse spiked. There were more names here, more silent whispers in dark basements. I asked the worker if I could review the file. She hesitated, then slid it across the desk with a wary glance. My fingers danced across the sticky notes and faded photographs, children whose stories ended too soon. My breath caught as I saw Margaret's neat scrawl marking a list of names, potential next rescues. My chest tightened with dread she hadn't acted alone. The protocol I followed would have to stretch further than ever before. That evening, I stood beneath my own basement stairs, the low ceiling pressing against my confidence like a warning. The damp concrete walls were lined with family heirlooms, an old trunk from Ethan's childhood, our mismatched camping gear, a stack of Anna's coloring books. Here, safety should have reigned. Instead, I felt the weight of threat pressing down, reminding me that darkness doesn't stay confined by walls. I retrieved the flashlight Olivia had lent me, its beam cutting through the gloom like a sword. In my pocket lay the thin envelope from Margaret, a reminder that every sacred space could be violated. I thought of Margaret's basement, where a frightened girl had counted tally marks until hope faded. Now my own basement felt both refuge and battlefield. I descended the stairs, each step a pact to protect. Near the corner, I spotted a loose brick I'd overlooked, a potential hiding spot large enough for a person. My stomach twisted. What if Margaret or one of her accomplices had stashed something here, planning to reclaim a captive? The beam of light landed on a small pile of dusty boards I'd stored against the wall. Behind them, the brick jutting out like an eye socket. My heart pounded, urging me forward, even as logic whispered retreat. I pried it loose and found beneath a tangle of cobwebs an envelope addressed not to me but to the Truth Keeper's Margaret's conspiracy cell. Inside were maps, coded instructions, and a list of addresses, including mine, marked with a skull symbol. My breath froze. The shadows I chased existed not just in strangers' minds, but in every hidden corner of my own home. Nightfall found me at my computer, the glow of the screen illuminating my tired face. With Olivia's help over speakerphone, I logged into the defunct Truth Keepers forum using the credentials extracted from Margaret's laptop. The chat room appeared a ghostly echo of paranoid rants and dire warnings about dangerous families and government cover-ups. Forums changed hands quickly, but here the data lingered like poison. I watched as old threads resurfaced, one titled Rescue Protocols, another Hidden Havens. Each post was signed by a pseudonym Sentinel Watcher Guardian. I realized these were Margaret's kindred spirits, the ones who fed her fear and fueled her actions. My pulse raced as I clicked a timestamp, a recent message from Sentinel discussing a new target too close to home. Comments below speculated on the identity. Some guessed I was the next victim, others believed I was the hero. My breath hitched at the irony. Half the forum saw me as prey, half as savior. A sudden ping signaled a private message. My heart lurched before I opened it. "We've noticed your interference. Step back or we'll drag the truth into the light." The author was unknown, typed in a shaky font but dripping with menace. My fingertips tingled with a mix of fear and defiance. I sent back a simple reply. "I won't be silent." Immediately, the screen flickered and the message disappeared, erased as though it had never existed. I leaned back, heart pounding, in the silence. I realized I was no longer fighting just Margaret's delusions. I was battling an entire network of conspirators. The risk had escalated beyond personal vengeance. It had become a war for every child's voice. Sleep came in fragments that night, dreams of hidden rooms and tally marks dancing in my mind. At dawn, I traded the safety of home for the raw chill of the farm road leading to Margaret's abandoned cottage, the one where detectives had found no sign of life, but plenty of evidence of her schemes. I parked behind a row of pines and slipped out of the SUV. Olivia's reassuring nod from the passenger seat melting my nerves only slightly. The cottage sat battered by time, its windows boarded, paint peeling in vertical tiers. A church spire loomed in the distance, its cross silhouetted against the sky like a silent judge. The location felt symbolic, a place of supposed sanctuary, turned into a prison of conspiracies. I stepped across the threshold, heart-thrumming flashlight cutting swaths through the dust. Every creak felt like an accusation. I spotted a tattered Bible on a table, pages marked and dog-eared, twisted justifications Margaret had used to justify her crusade. The floorboards led to a trap door in the floor, the only indicator a twisted handle nearly invisible under grime. Logic collided with fear. Part of me screamed to leave. Another part demanded I know the full extent of this hidden world. I gripped the handle and pulled upward. The hinges groaned a protest as they revealed a shallow crawl space. Darkness pooled beneath. I hesitated, imagining the desperate souls who'd hid here believing they were safe. My own heartbeat sounded like a gospel sermon urging me onward. I shone the light downward and saw footprints in the dust, recent ones too fresh to be old evidence. Someone had come here after Margaret's arrest, probing her secrets. I swallowed the risk of discovery sharp in my veins. I could find more captives, or walk into a trap. As I crouched on the threshold, I faced a choice that threatened everything I'd built. But before I could move, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Call me. Now." I knew instinctively not to risk a signal here. I flicked off the flashlight, swallowed a breath, and darted back outside. The air was crisp, the pines whispering overhead. Olivia stood beside the SUV, her face pale. "Anna's gone," she whispered, voice cracking the calm morning air. I froze, every muscle coiling. "What do you mean, gone?" She pointed toward our house now, a distant silhouette against the sunrise. She slipped away. Nobody saw her. Just gone. My chest tightened so fiercely I thought I'd suffocate. Anna. My second chance at motherhood couldn't be missing again. The risk of returning home collided with the need to find her. I pressed Olivia's arm, repeating her name like a mantra. Nearby, the oak's branches rattled in warning. My mind spun through possibilities. Had the conspiracy network abducted Anna as retaliation? Had someone in the forum tracked her? Or was this a cruel twist of fate? The logic of protection I'd built around my family had been shattered. I drew in a shuddering breath and ran toward the SUV, adrenaline smashing through my veins. Each step felt like a confession. I had brought Anna into this world of darkness, and now I had to bring her back. I floored the accelerator and barreled down the farm road, gravel spitting behind me like jagged threats. My hands trembled on the wheel, and I called 911, voice rough. My foster daughter, Anna Torres, has gone missing. We're near the old Collins cottage. Please hurry. The dispatcher asked questions. I answered between gasps. In the back seat, Zoe sat wide-eyed, buttons clutched to her chest. She mouthed, "Mommy," and I turned to smile, even though fear flooded me. "I'm going to find her," I said, voice firmer than I felt. We streamed onto the highway, sirens wailing behind as deputies joined in the chase. My mind raced. What price had I paid for this sanctuary I'd built? The risk I'd taken to oust Margaret had unleashed forces I barely understood. But no matter the cost, I couldn't let Anna vanish into those shadows again. I sent a flurry of texts to neighbors, to Claire, and to school officials, anyone who might have seen her. Yet none replied fast enough. My heart hammered like a warning drumbeat. Outside the window, fields streamed by, indifferent to my panic. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, Anna, barefoot, clutching the frayed straps of her small backpack as she stepped onto an embankment near the church. Relief and fury collided in my chest as I skidded to a halt and dashed toward her, the gravel biting my palms. She looked up, eyes wide and tear-streaked. I scooped her into my arms, feeling the weight of every mistake and every promise I'd broken and kept. As we held each other, the church bell tolled overhead, a solitary note that cut through the tumult. I realized this rescue was far from over. Finding Anna meant confronting the deeper shadows that chased us. That night, back at home, I sat at the kitchen table as Anna and Zoe slept in adjacent rooms. The echo of the church bell still reverberated in my mind, a reminder that even sanctuaries must be protected. I spread out the maps from Margaret's envelope, the coded instructions now smeared with my tears. My hands hovered over the lines connecting addresses, possible safe houses for kidnapped children, or hideouts for the conspiracy's next move. I pored over every clue, every margin note in Margaret's spidery script, and a horrifying possibility emerged. The network had grown beyond her, infecting others who believed in its mission. I traced a path through hidden roads and private properties, feeling the weight of each mile, a trail I'd have to follow to dismantle their operation. But the risk loomed. If I went after them too soon, I might lose everything I'd fought to protect. As dawn slipped into darkness and back into dawn, I wrestled with the paradox of courage. Its power comes not from fearlessness, but from choosing to act despite fear. In the flickering light of the kitchen lamp, a 3-armed candelabra I'd reclaimed from Margaret's cottage, I saw the shadows dance, a living testament to the truth that danger thrives where light is scarce. I grabbed a pen and began plotting my next move, knowing that tomorrow I would stand beneath the oak, ready to unearth every secret in its roots. The door to the unknown stood ajar, and I was ready to step through it. In the quiet moments before sleep, I cradled a mug of tea and looked at the framed photograph of Ethan on the mantel, him laughing under fireworks, Zoe in his arms. I whispered to him, as I did every night, "We're still a family, even if we're broken." And in that promise, I found the strength to face the darkness. The truth lived not in shadows, but in the choice to bring it into the open. As I watched the oak's silhouette ripple against the moonlit sky, I knew our fight was far from over. But I also knew that no conspiracy, no threat, no hidden network could survive in the light of a mother's love. And with that thought, I blew out the lamp, and let the shadows tremble at our resolve. I woke before first light muscles still humming from the night's frantic search for Anna. My kitchen smelled of cold coffee, and the faint tang of Oak Button's glass eye caught a sliver of dawn, reminding me why I couldn't rest. Claire and Olivia arrived with maps spread across my countertop, Sheriff Ruiz tapping his pen against a folder bulging with evidence. We whispered strategy over chipped mugs, measuring every risk a wrong move could send the conspirators scattering or worse, drive Anna into deeper hiding. My heart pounded as I traced routes through empty barns and abandoned roadways, places Margaret's network might use to stash other children. Each line on the map felt like a lifeline thrown into darkness. I thought of the tally marks on that basement door, the tiny wings scratched into the wood above Anna's head. I realized that every rescue was only as strong as its next step, and today's could decide whether innocence would finally see daylight again. As the sun bled pink across the sky, I felt something stir deep inside, a promise I'd made to Zoe, to Anna, to every lost voice begging to be heard. But as the first patrol car roared past my gate, I knew rescuing one child wasn't enough. There were more shadows to chase. We assembled at a disused grain silo on the edge of town, its rusty metal walls groaning in the breeze. Olivia had lined up volunteers to guard the farmhouse, and Ruiz coordinated patrols around the perimeter. I handed out the flash drive with Margaret's files, encrypted messages, lists of safe houses, coded aliases like Sentinel and Watcher that had once seemed like harmless usernames. Together, we cross-checked names with school records, social media posts, even parking permits for local churches. Every ally we recruited carried their own scars. Claire's grief for her own daughter, Olivia's frustration at a system too slow to protect the vulnerable Ruiz's silent guilt over the children still missing. Our shared pain fused into a weapon more powerful than any conspiracy. But just as we finalized the list of suspects, I noticed something chilling on the caseworker's clipboard, a report marked confidential author stamped with the same red ink Margaret used. My blood ran cold. Had someone inside social services been feeding the network? My pulse throbbed as I realized the real enemy had been hiding in plain sight. That afternoon, we set our trap. Using a burner phone, I posted a forged message in the Truth Keepers forum, a tip about a supposed new child hidden at the old railway station outside town. I watched the replies flood in eager volunteers promising to rescue this phantom and drag her to safety. We tracked IP addresses back to a handful of locations, a shuttered church, a county fair storage unit, and one address disturbingly close to my own neighborhood. I felt the hairs on my arms stand on end. As dusk fell, 6 deputies moved in on the railway station while Claire and I staked out the fairgrounds. My hands shook as I gripped my phone, waiting for the signal that the raid had begun. There was no turning back now. Either we exposed the network's reach, or we watched it slip through our fingers. My breath caught as the warehouse doors creaked open and silhouettes began to appear. The ambush erupted in a flurry of shouting and flashing lights. Deputies surrounded 2 men and a woman dressed in nondescript clothing, their faces twisted in fear and anger as the cuffs snapped shut. I recognized one of them, Ms. Turner, the art teacher at Zoe's school, the one whose gentle smile always put kids at ease. My chest tightened. How many parents would be blindsided to learn she'd been recruiting from their classrooms? Beside me, Claire gripped my arm, eyes wide with disbelief. In the chaos, someone dropped a canvas bag filled with binders, photos, and hard drives, evidence of other children, other cages waiting to be unlocked. My throat went dry as the realization sank in. The network was deeper and wider than we feared. Yet here they stood, stripped of their armor, exposed under the raw glare of justice. I stepped forward and grabbed the bag, feeling its bulk like the weight of every child's silent plea. I stared at the familiar face blinking under the warehouse lights, a friend turned foe, and knew this was only the beginning. Back home, word spread fast. The local news splashed our faces across TVs, a mother with a wild look of relief and exhaustion flanked by officers and community leaders praising our heroic takedown. But online, the story splintered. Some lauded our courage. Others labeled me a vigilante who'd interrupted an innocent spiritual movement. I felt the sting of social media's fickle jury. But when Zoe and Anna wrapped me in a hug, their arms small and insistent around my waist, I remembered why I fought. That night, over warm soup and half-forgotten bedtime stories, the girls giggled as I told them a new tale of two brave sisters who outsmarted monsters in the dark. Their laughter echoed like a balm. But as I tucked them in, I found another note slipped under the guest room door in red ink again. They're never alone. My heart clenched. I would savor this family moment, this fragile peace, but an old instinct whispered that the network's embers still glowed, waiting to ignite. In the days that followed, I worked with prosecutors to piece together the full extent of the conspiracy. We uncovered safe houses in neighboring counties, identified forum moderators, even traced funding streams through cryptocurrency accounts. Each breakthrough felt like pulling a splinter from a wound, necessary but painful. The local pastor, who'd offered Margaret spiritual counsel, stood accused of aiding in recruitment. A youth counselor lost her license. Our town's tidy image cracked open, revealing the fissures of fear and belief that had let this rot spread. I found myself testifying at city council meetings, addressing questions from journalists, even meeting with legislators about tightening child protection laws. The exhaustion was real. My nights blurred into days, my cafe mug permanently stained with ink from countless notes, but I felt a fierce pride in knowing that our sacrifices would light a path for others. And as the oak outside my window shook with a sudden gust, its leaves rustling like whispered secrets, I realized that safety isn't a destination, but a promise we renew every day. Now, on a quiet evening, I sit on my porch beneath that same oak tree, buttons on my lap, the twilight painting the fields in deep violet. Zoe and Anna chase fireflies in the yard, their laughter rising like music I never dared to hope for. In this moment, I feel an inner strength I didn't know I had born of grief, honed by fear, tempered in action. I understand that belief in our children's truth is the most radical act of all, the one that can topple silos of conspiracies and rebuild them into bridges of trust. Yet as I close my eyes, I sense the faintest stir of wind, the promise of another storm on the horizon. Wherever darkness gathers, there's always a new story waiting to be heard. I breathe in the night air, steady and sure, and whisper into its arms, "We're listening." Outside, the oak sways under a gathering storm, and I know that listening with an open heart is the only way to weather whatever comes next.